in a remote rainforest. Thousands of bones. Evidence of a mass murder. The victims, possibly the most powerful people of their world. A royal dynasty at the height of its glory. Executed. Tossed into a waterhole. Over 1,000 years later, this pit holds powerful evidence. Not just to the fate of these people, but to the collapse of one of the great civilizations in history. A mystery that hints of passion, jealousy, and greed. Centuries before our time, night falls on a faraway land. A land of splendor, a land of riches, a land ruled by mighty kings, lords of awesome power, fabulously wealthy, enjoying all life's pleasures, masters of fate. But something is about to happen. Something all their power can't prevent. Everything is about to change forever. Cancuén, Guatemala. Once a teeming city at the heart of a great civilization, the Maya. A mystery is emerging from the heart of this jungle. An eerie discovery. Thousands of bones. Bones that once were people. Their discoverers can't believe what they found. In this jungle, the heat, moisture, insects, and acid soil usually turn buried bones to dust. But these bones are in near perfect condition. For archaeologist Arthur Demarest, it's a rare and exciting find. And a very unsettling one.
You feel like a detective going into a crime scene where there's some really weird stuff. There's a lot of things about it that are strange.
Strange and disturbing. There are so many bones. Too much death. Perhaps dozens of human bodies. Thrown into a pool of water. All at the same time. Something terrifying happened to these people. But what? And why? First possibility. Human sacrifice. Horrific to us, but for the Maya, essential to life. They believed their gods demanded human blood. The Maya gave it. And their gods gave them bountiful harvests and recognized their kings as sacred beings. But does human sacrifice explain what happened to these people? The evidence says no.
None of this looks like a sacrifice from the normal Maya rituals. None of it. The Maya would sacrifice one or two high prestige individuals with a great deal of ritual. and with specific techniques. This is a large number of people thrown into this location.
It doesn't look like these people died to please the gods. And they didn't die of natural causes. It appears they were murdered.
This is definitely the most gruesome and certainly the largest scale massacre that we've ever found.
A massacre with no known motive. Unknown victims. Unknown killers. A centuries-old cold case crying out to be solved. These shattered skeletons have yet to yield their secrets. But there's already key evidence. Pieces of pottery found with the bones. Experts date them to around the year 800 AD. A crucial discovery. One that takes us right to the scene of the crime. Conquén was once a bustling city-state. One of many that dotted an area the size of New Mexico or Italy. That area today is southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. 1,200 years ago, it was the land of the Maya. Some 50 independent city-states scattered across the rainforest. The biggest of those cities boasted more than 10,000 structures and 100,000 people. The Maya erected magnificent buildings, created beautiful art, invented the America's most complex writing system, and devised their own mathematics. Maya astronomers charted every inch of the sky. They were traders, warriors, wizards. Whoever our victims were, they lived in a world of wealth and splendor. Their city wasn't the biggest, but it did have one very big advantage. Location. Conquén sat right at the junction of major Maya trade routes. It was Hong Kong, Singapore, Amsterdam, Panama Canal. In this part of the world, if you wanted to buy or sell anything, you had to move it through Conquén. And Conquén had one other asset that guaranteed its greatness. His name was Taj Chanak. Around the time of the murders, he had ruled Conquén for an astounding 40 years. Every Maya city had its own king. But Taj Chanak was a superstar. His people attended great rituals where he offered his blood to the gods. Slashing his body, cutting his tongue, even piercing his penis in exchange for peace, prosperity, and life-giving rain. Wounding his own flesh for their sake. inspiring their complete devotion. Ruling them with a skill and charisma modern politicians would envy.
The holy lords that were really successful, like Taj Chanak, were the ones who would combine, a Beckham with a Mick Jagger, with a little Bill Clinton, and maybe a Machiavelli, a Kissinger, in terms of making alliance. If you can sort of see all those combined with a, Pope John Paul II.
Taj Chanak's extraordinary leadership and Kangquen's strategic location at the crossroads of trade routes could have helped him bring his city to the pinnacle of its wealth and influence. And he may not have needed an army to dominate his competitors. If anyone got out of line, he could have cut off their access to the sacred goods that poured through his city. Like spondylus shells and quetzal feathers. Without these sacred objects, no one could offer blood to the gods. Without those rituals, kings were powerless, and their cities risked divine displeasure. In the high-stakes game of Maya politics, Taj Chanak would always have held a winning hand. It's hard to imagine a mass murder in Kangquen while such a strong ruler was in power. But around 800 AD, death ended Taj's 40-year reign. And everything changed. Our victims met their grisly fate, and it wasn't long before their rich city of Kangquen also ceased to exist. But that's only part of the mystery. Within 100 years, all the surrounding Maya cities became ghost towns. After centuries of greatness, the Maya world rapidly disintegrated. No one knows why.
Forget the arts and the tombs and the glyphs and the science. The question is, why did they at the end screw up so badly?
Arthur Demarest hopes that Kangquen's hoard of bones will help reveal answers to that question. Because before they died, our victims could have witnessed the end of their own world. And their strange deaths made them some of the best preserved Maya bones ever found. Their killers tossed them into what is today a muddy pond in a forgotten patch of rainforest. But 1,200 years ago, it was a sacred pool lined with stucco near Kangquen's royal palace. The bodies sank into its muddy bottom. Silt and water covered and protected the bones for over 1,000 years. Now, these bones can reveal things no other Maya bones ever have. And what first emerges is more than disturbing. It's bizarre. Strangely misshapen skulls. The bones of babies. These were no ordinary victims. This was no ordinary crime. In Guatemala, a rare find is shedding light on an ancient crime. The evidence points to a horrific massacre in an ancient Maya city, about the time the entire civilization began to fall. Right away, the fragments of shattered bones reveal something odd. It's the skulls. They're not right.
You compare how this forehead is to this one. This has been pushed backwards, completely pushed backwards, creating this the sides of the head to expand sideways.
Compared to a normal skull, this one has a flat forehead and an elongated top. It looks like a strange genetic defect, but it's not. It may have been a deliberate act of reverence. Some experts believe the Maya reshaped their skulls to honor corn. The Maya lived and died by their corn crop. In gratitude, they may have offered the corn god a strange tribute, altering their children's skulls at birth.
The amazing thing about this skull is that it's intentional deformation, cranial deformation.
A newborn skull is a loose collection of bony plates. The Maya molded their babies' heads with planks until they were long and slender. Finding skulls like this raises a tantalizing possibility.
We're dealing with people who were rather well off for that time. The only people who were rather well off that time were obviously the rulers and their families.
Not everyone agrees that the corn-shaped skulls mean royalty. But something else found in the pit offers more proof that our victims were the cream of society. Jade. More valuable to the Maya than gold. Our victims wore staggering amounts of it. And one of them wore something even more precious than jade. A necklace of jaguar teeth. A jaguar has 4 fangs. One necklace found at Conquen had 36. Making it required hunting and killing 9 of the biggest cats in the Americas. Buying it must have cost a fortune. Whoever the owner was, he was very rich. And it seems our victims could afford whatever they wanted. They would have had their pick of the best that Conquen's markets had to offer. They would have loaded their tables with expensive delicacies like chocolate, honey, vanilla, jaguar pelts, tobacco, and the sweet flesh of iguana. And they would have adorned their homes and their bodies with precious stones. Jewelry made of jade and mother of pearl, and exquisite feathers, like the tail plumes of a quetzal. Only nobles could own a quetzal feather. If a commoner killed a quetzal, he could have been executed.
These goodies that are coming in, the jades and the quetzal feathers and all of these things, could only be owned by nobles and kings. So they weren't for sale to anybody. You had to be a holy lord to to have much of this.
And not just beautiful things. Commoners could marry only one wife. But Conquen's aristocrats had many. They've lived with them in stupendous luxury. In a massive 200-room palace, bigger than 5 football fields. One of the biggest buildings in the Maya world. They expected their deaths would be as luxurious as their lives. That they'd go to eternity clutching priceless jade ornaments, drenched with cinnabar, precious symbol of eternal life, and looking forever fabulous, hiding mortal decay behind a magnificent death mask. But when death did come, it wasn't anything like our victims thought it would be. They weren't buried like mighty lords. They weren't buried at all. The strange case of Conquen is getting even stranger. The victims seem to have been the richest people in town. They would have had the best of everything. Plenty of people would have coveted what they had. But the evidence rules out robbery. It appears that their murderers tossed them into a pool still wearing their jewelry. The motive for this massacre wasn't money. So what was it? And now the bones reveal another shocking fact. The victims weren't all men. Some 31 people died here. Men, women, children. And there's another chilling revelation from the death pit. One that suggests this was no simple slaughter. Whatever happened to these people, it didn't end with death. In Guatemala, a 1,200-year-old cold case is beginning to reveal its secrets. The killers and their motive still unknown. But there's new evidence. The murder weapons. Flint axes and knives found with the victim's bones. The new discovery takes the investigation down a very dark path.
What we're seeing is perhaps evidence of something that happened very suddenly. It was evidently very violent, very, very violent.
The investigators have seen evidence like this before. But not from ancient times. During Guatemala's bloody civil war. In Bosnia. In Rwanda's killing fields. Some of the worst mass murders and genocides of our time. The bones of people hacked to pieces, torn limb from limb. Men, women, and children. And now in remote Conquen, they're seeing something similar.
Almost every bone that we've looked at has some sort of trauma.
It's not clear if the bones were hacked before or after death, or why.
We have evidence of a very heavy and sharp instrument, perhaps an axe, something like that, coming through and severing the femoral head from the rest of the bone.
The femur is the thigh bone, one of the hardest human bones to break. It looks like whoever killed these people also dismembered them, and may have hunted some down as they tried to escape.
This cut came from behind. A heavy and sharp instrument cut it through and then broke the rest of the bone. The individual was perhaps already lying prone, out of action perhaps, and being dismembered, or the person was running away or trying to get away with their back towards their assailant and failing to do so, evidently.
These people probably had no chance to defend themselves from their attackers. Attackers who left their weapons with their victims' corpses, providing evidence of their fates.
It does fit very, very well with the actual wound. This little wound would have been caused here, back of the head of a child. You can see the damage it caused on the inside.
Take the case of one victim, a boy.
This is the bone from the neck. It belongs to a very young child, under 12 years old.
The attackers might have surprised him, but he tries to run away. They're too fast. He has nowhere to go.
This is evidence of a stab wound to the neck. The only way that this type of wound could have happened is if the head had been pulled backwards and the stab wound would have come underneath the mandible.
It would have been a terrifying end for one so young. But even this boy wasn't the youngest to die. This is the bone of a baby.
These are the hip bones. This smaller one is the fetus of 32 weeks, whereas this one is a 38 week.
The evidence in the bones suggests a grim possibility. This wasn't soldiers dying in a war. It wasn't a religious sacrifice. Could it be the extermination of an entire family? If these were nobles, they didn't come to a noble end. But why? And now, at the discovery site, a new find deepens the mystery. 80 yards from the pool of the bones, a shallow grave. Inside, the badly decomposed bones of a man. Whoever buried this man carefully placed a string of beautifully carved shells in his grave. In the Maya world, an act of reverence, honoring only the most important dead. But Maya nobility lay in magnificent tombs. This man's grave barely covered his corpse.
This burial is really bizarre. There's no tomb. There's not even a cyst, there's not even stone slabs over it, and it's just dug 60 centimeters deep into mud. And yet, this individual is in this elaborate headdress that goes all the way down to his feet. It looks like a sudden, rapid burial, but with a certain element of respect.
Who was this man? The secret lies in the shells. In Guatemala, the investigation of an ancient massacre takes a startling new turn. Near the victims, a man buried with trappings of royalty, but in a shallow, unmarked grave, with seashells carved into glyphs of the Maya language. The investigation hangs on what these ancient words will reveal, if anyone can read them. Hundreds of years ago, a relentless attack nearly exterminated the Maya language. 1519. The first Europeans arrive in Maya lands. Spanish conquistadors seeking gold. And Christian missionaries seeking souls. To their amazement, they find books written in the Maya language, the most advanced language ever invented in the Americas. Books recording the genius of a great civilization, elaborate calendars, astronomy texts, blueprints for majestic rituals. But to the Spanish, they are works of Satan. Unable to read them, disturbed by their strange images, the Spaniards burn them. Only 4 books are known to have survived the Spaniards' relentless destruction. The most sophisticated language ever developed in the Americas was lost. Only in the 1960s did experts begin to crack its secrets. Have they learned enough to read the shells from Canquen? Glyph expert Federico Fassen searches the shells for a name. He recognizes the monkey head glyph, the Maya word Mash, and another glyph, Khan. Who was he? Fassen knows the answer. Stone carvings from Canquen have the same symbols, and a glyph for royalty. The man's name was Khan Mash, and there's no doubt who he was. Khan Mash was a king of Canquen, the city where our murders took place. A wealthy, powerful ruler, buried like a beggar in a shallow, unmarked grave. Why would a king be insulted like this? It doesn't add up. But the glyphs reveal one more thing. King Khan Mash died around the year 800 AD, around the same time as the 31 massacred nobles, found only 80 yards from his grave. Could our victims have been Khan Mash's family, a royal family? Arthur Demarest finds a grim parallel in the 20th century. The Romanovs. In 1918, revolutionaries captured the Russian Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children, and shot them all, even the youngest. destroying their dynasty. Were the victims at Canquén also deliberately exterminated?
It looks like the assassination of the king and the massacre of the whole royal family. And then nothing. The site is abandoned.
It would have been a stunning reversal of fortune. Not long after the massacre, the great city of Canquén plummets from its pinnacle of wealth and power to extinction. As the evidence mounts up, one thing is clear. The case of the Canquén massacre is about much more than murder. Fact. The Canquén murders happened around 800 AD. Fact, King Kanmash died around the year 800 AD. Fact, the city of Canquén suddenly disappears from history around 800 AD. Fact, the Maya begin abandoning all their cities around 800 AD. A ghastly massacre, a king's insulting burial, the sudden death of a great city, the unexplained collapse of a brilliant civilization, all around the same time. Solving the Canquén murders could do much more than lay to rest a 1,200-year-old cold case.
What we have here is real, hardcore, physical evidence of the Maya collapse and the kinds of things that happened in the Maya collapse. And as one of the forensic team said to me yesterday, you know, this is evidence that would stand up in court.
No one's sure what triggered the Maya collapse. Perhaps environmental disaster. For centuries, the Maya cut down trees for fuel and to plant crops. But trees protect soil from erosion. When they cut down their forests, the Maya exposed their lands to the destructive power of wind and water, which turned them into sterile wastelands. Just when the worst drought in centuries began ravaging their lands. But most experts believe drought and famine weren't the only things that destroyed the Maya. They argue that Maya politics may have helped. A possibility Arthur Demarest ponders as he tries to explain the murders at Canquén. The knives and axes found with the bodies revealed the murder weapons. But the motive might still be hidden decades before the massacre. In a high-stakes world of sex, politics, and power. Around 800 AD, the Maya king, Kanmash, was buried in a very unroyal manner. In a shallow, unmarked grave. And someone murdered dozens of people, perhaps Kanmash's relatives, dismembered them, and tossed them into a pool just 80 yards from his grave. It seems to defy explanation. But archaeologist Arthur Demarest thinks it might make sense. It might help explain one of history's least understood catastrophes. The sudden and total collapse of the Maya world. Around the same time as the Canquén murders, vast numbers of people suddenly began abandoning Canquén and other Maya cities. Before they died, our victims might have seen armies of refugees leaving Kangkwen and traveling through the rainforest, overwhelming other cities when they arrived seeking food and shelter.
To some extent, what we have here is a kind of a domino effect. The collapse and abandonment of these cities in the West. The problem is displaced persons, as the UN calls them today. You know, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people losing their homes and migrating to other regions.
More and more people grew more and more desperate. And suddenly things went from very, very bad to much, much worse.
All of a sudden you got another 10, 20, 30,000, 100,000 people moving into your region, man, then things really fall apart.
Things fell apart with astonishing speed. Right after our victims died, the city of Kangkwen was no more, and the splendid Maya world began to disappear, while chaos and bloodshed rushed in to fill the void.
And it's sudden, and it's, you know, within 50 years, and it's violent.
Why did it happen? What did our victims witness in the final days of their lives? It's long been suspected that a fatal combination of drought and overpopulation, too many people, not enough food, destroyed the Maya. But another theory adds something else to this recipe of doom. Something that could be one of the motives for the dreadful murders at Kangkwen. Murders that might be traced to a most unexpected perpetrator. Khan Mash's father, King Taj Chanak. Kangkwen's greatest monarch didn't actually murder his son and relations. When those killings took place, Taj was already dead. But great Maya kings like Taj Chanak may have sown seeds of discord that led to the killings. Not with violence, but with sex. By exercising the right of Maya kings to have any woman they wanted. And not just for pleasure. Like other Maya rulers, Taj could have forged alliances by marrying other kings' daughters. The more alliances, the better. Call it strategic polygamy. For a king like Taj, it was a quest for even greater power. But for his descendants, it may have begotten disaster. Because while all those royal marriages did create long-lasting alliances, they also created a longer-lasting problem. Royal children. Experts have done the math. If the king of a Maya city had only 4 children, and those 4 children each had 4, and their 16 grandchildren each had 4, the king would have 32 great-grandchildren. And that's with only 1 wife. Multiply that number by several wives, and after only 200 years, more than 500 people in one Maya city could claim royal blood. Arthur Demarest thinks that may be why Kangkwen's royal palace boasted a staggering 200 rooms. And why, beneath its bustling prosperity, the city may have seethed with tension
rivalry between nobles and kings, and the competition was pretty central to classic Maya civilization. They would breed a number of the people in their courts that they would put on the thrones in different places. The sub-nobles were all working to increase their prestige, which was really a major source of their power. And that not only involved wars and rituals and alliances, but also building bigger temples and having a more impressive display. This competitive rivalry between these rulers got to be increasingly expensive.
Were our victims some of these competing aristocrats, commissioning ever more impressive monuments to outdo one another? If they were, they didn't build them, and they didn't pay for them. That fell on the shoulders of the common people, as forced labor and as taxes.
You had a growing burden on the society, on the middle and lower classes in terms of what they had to produce in order to support this growing system of status rivalry.
Seen through this lens, the wealthy, luxurious world of our victims suddenly looks very different. Fractured by smoldering hatreds. Commoners against nobles. Nobles against one another. Kings against kings. Jealousies and power struggles draining treasuries and using up food supplies. Perhaps even as drought began withering the fields. And even prosperous cities like Conquen edged closer to the brink. Suddenly, the insulting burial of Khan Mash doesn't seem so puzzling. And the massacre of an entire noble family doesn't seem so strange. Arthur Demarest believes that by 800 AD, only a king as strong as Taj Chanak could have held Conquen's cracking facade together. After him, no one could.
It isn't surprising that right after Taj Chanak everything falls apart. You just have too many elites, too many rivals, and in a status rivalry system it was bound to blow apart at some point. And at Conquen it really blew apart in a dramatic way. This find is a kind of a keystone. I mean, it just pulls everything together in terms of understanding the Maya collapse. It's really unusual to find that, and to find this kind of a snapshot of one of the moments in the disintegration of this civilization, one of the more unfortunate and tragic moments. It's very important because it shows us that civilizations can really screw up. It's a war crime from 1,200 years ago.
No one knows who killed Conquen's murder victims. Was it commoners who had enough of forced labor and crushing taxes? Or jealous relatives who wanted their rivals out of the way? Or perhaps other cities coveting Conquen's riches or tired of its stranglehold on trade? But reading the riddle of these butchered bones leaves us with a profound lesson. The Maya prospered for over 1,000 years, feeding huge populations in the middle of the tropics, building cities of stupendous size and beauty, calculating calendars of astonishing accuracy, creating sophisticated language, complex mathematics, and beautiful art. They conquered nature. They conquered time. They conquered the world of the mind. But there was one thing all their brilliance couldn't conquer, and it ultimately destroyed them. They couldn't conquer themselves.